Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for your time, and thanks for your understanding. Yeah. Okay, just a bit of context. We've been reading representing African music in the last 10 months now. I think that's November. Um, in the last 10 months, we've engaged the material closely through a monthly seminar reading sessions where we engage each chapters and engaging core ideas. And today, I haven't read the entire book by now as of June. And we have Professor Agawu uh, among us. And I think it is good for us to also do the same session with him, but in a different way. So he becomes he wrote the book, of course, some 20 something years ago. But we are also interested in hearing from him how he feels about the book today and reflecting on this book in the last 20 something years. What has changed? What uh, is it thinking about this idea of representation today, particularly when we have new forms of representations? Digital technology, AI, social media has taken over the. So we are interested in exploring this transition from 20 years ago than what has happened today. So, Professor Agawu, once again, you are welcome, and we are happy to have you. So, we are just going to start. Of course, with me today it's an interesting session. We have Professor Olabode Omojola also. So, I and Professor Omojola, we are going to engage. Sometimes it's good. I'm happy to have Professor Omojola here because Professor Omojola has been engaging the book far better than even I myself. So it's good. They say when you travel with champions. So I'm happy I have a champion with me so we can engage Professor Agawu together. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'm going to start, then I will hand over to Professor Majola shortly. So Professor Agawu, I'm going to start with a few, more like a kind of opening. So this is around motivation. What really motivated you at the time to write representing African music?
Yeah, to thank all of you who suffered through this book over the last 10 months. It's an honor. Those of us who write books, we don't take it for granted that people are going to actually read what you write. So to know that you were studying the book was something that I was deeply gratified by. I just want to say, because there's no grand plan, this book is really a collection of essays, and there were specific issues that I wanted to address, and I did so, and I sent it to a press. They sent it out to readers. Some said publish it, some said don't publish it. That we can get into all of that if you like, because there's a politics to publication. But eventually, Routledge agreed to publish it, and so we have the book. Those of you who haven't seen the book, this is what it looks like, representing African music. And then it has the subtitle, Post-Colonial Notes, Queries, and Positions. So I guess, the question of motivation, the individual chapters, I don't know what you mean by motivation. Sounds, a little mystifying to me. But the individual chapters addressed, excuse me, very specific issues. So colonialism, which is something all of us have been talking about, and then there's, not in the order in which they come, there's a chapter on music and language, which I call music as text. There's a chapter on popular music. There's a chapter on ethics. There's a chapter on difference. That's the one that people wanted my head for. There's a chapter on analysis. There's a chapter on the archive near the beginning. And there are a couple of chapters on rhythm. So these are just individual topics that seem to me to be of interest. When I was being trained as a graduate student, there was something we used to joke about, which is complete bibliographical control, CBC. They used to say that before you add your 2 cents to whatever topic is being discussed, do your homework. Now, this was possible in the musicology that I studied, or desirable even, because there were fewer things written, and you worked within a circumscribed field. It wasn't always possible for some fields, and so I tried as much as possible to do my homework, read the things. It doesn't mean that you will understand them. In fact, some people have criticized me saying, yeah, you only engage with the superficial aspects of my book. I won't give you any more names in case you write to them to ask. So I want to just get away from the idea that there was some single motivating thing that led me to write this book. No, it was a collection of essays that I brought together. They happened to have some resonance among them, and I put it out there to see what happens.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. So what I have also done, prepared particular for this conversation to make it a kind of not too academic in nature, is that to outline the basic some arguments from the book, and these include representation, power, difference, and there's another analysis. So I'm going to run through each of them quickly, and I'll hand over to you. So the first one I want to talk about is representation. In chapter 2, this is in chapter 2, where you discuss the issues around archive, and also issues around access in African music knowledge. In that chapter, you focus on one of the key arguments and claim, perhaps, is that the archive of African music knowledge are not necessarily on the continent. They are in Europe, they are in Berlin, they are in New York. Yeah. So that is one. Then that also speaks to the notion of access. Then there's another layer to that argument, which is about on the continent also ability, the access of Africanist scholar to also travel abroad, economic issue, you narrate others, which are quite interesting and I found very important in this conversation. Then chapter 3, of course. Okay, let me go to chapter 4. So in chapter 4, notions of rhythm, polymeter, complex rhythms, and standard pattern, I think we engage. Chapter 5, I'm going to be more specific now in chapter 5, which is our attempt to challenging binaries such as functional and art music and exploring conception of African music as texts. I think we should start briefly with that. And the other one, which I think two other points that are so important also is popular music, chapter 6, and chapter 7. I think that's where we have resisting difference, or yeah. Okay, let's start from the African music as text. In the last few days, we've been discussing some notions of text in different ways, both through AI. So what is your perspective on this today?
Well, my perspective hasn't changed because what I was trying to do there was just to rethink African music as text and think of text in an expanded sense so that we could accommodate different kinds of textual expression. So if you say, what is my perspective? Unless you ask me a more specific question, I can just say, whatever I said in that chapter, which even I can't remember now, I haven't changed my mind about necessarily. I did enjoy the opportunity to weigh in on things like something we've talked about here, talking drumming, for example, these questions of surrogacy. Think of them through a semiotic lens, So that was kind of interesting for me to talk about. But it may be that, I don't know how you want to do this, but there may be people who were in the seminars who may want to weigh in on some of these issues, or maybe have been kept awake at night wondering why the hell I wrote this or that. So
definitely they are going to be part of it, but we need to open the floor for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things you wrote on page 195 is that text in this context is something woven by performer composers who conceive and produce the music and dance, by listeners and viewers who consume it, and by critics who constitute it as text for the purposes of analysis and interpretation. That's one of the key points and you frame this within a kind of African music as theory, as discourse and cultural epistemology. Yeah, I think let's move to chapter 6. I think we have some more provocative question there around why is the most widely heard music on the continent also not the most written about or taught in higher institutions, and that's popular music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's dwell on that because it's a slightly complicated issue. Scholarship is motivated by different things. Some of it is the tradition of writing, right? In other words, what preceded yours. So sometimes when people start to define a research project, they're not necessarily looking around to see what seems important or what seems salient. They're saying what has been written about before that I can piggyback on or that I can attack or whatever it is, So when I pose a question about popular music by saying, clearly, popular music is a music that is dominant in our societies, of course. We can argue about that if you want quantities and so on. But why is it that in the scholarly literature on African music, remember this is 2003 now, this is not that this music is not the most widely written about. I think some of it is just the inertia of earlier scholarship, Some of it is, do we have the tools to write about popular music? And I have to say that in these last 20 years, a lot of that has changed, and there's been a flourishing literature on African popular music.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to chip in there. Is it not also a tradition of musicology generally, even in Europe, whereby it took a while before popular music came to the classroom, became a subject for students, and even though a few people were writing about it, do you draw any comparison between that and what obtained in Africa, or is there a little subtle difference between the two?
Well, there is an underlying value system, let's face it, that people who were writing about European classical music at a certain point thought nothing of popular music, For them, it was the great composers, and they were mostly German, but, throw in a few French and Italian and so on. And they were concentrated in really a small geographical space. This was a tradition, and this was a tradition out of which musicology grew. Popular music was not on the radar for them because it was everyday music. And the value system was that these more cerebral musics written by the Beethovens and the Bachs, which are celebrated here at Organ House as well, that this is the music that is qualitatively at a higher level than the music that repeats all the time and that people dance to and so on. Now, our views have changed over the period, but I'm just saying that was partly. So you're absolutely right. European musicology took a while to come to terms with popular music. I have to say also that there's a difference between scholars who see themselves as musicologists and who therefore want to work with what we call the music itself, although now people want us to ban that term. But the thing that we call the music itself, they want to work with the notes. Why do you choose an E flat? Why does this note follow that? There are scholars who work in that tradition, and those who come at music from a different perspective, who are interested in, this group likes to make music this way. This group likes to dance. So music is inserted into a larger network of behaviors. And musicologists of a certain persuasion will say, well, if you're not focusing on the music itself, then I'm not interested in what you have to say. Whereas people who are much more culturally aware will want music to be seen in context. This question of music in context and music itself, these are very fraught categories, by the way. And if we went into them philosophically, we would see that there's never a context. You know, you're always in some sort of context. So, but yeah, I think I've spoken to what you're saying.
You have, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. Let's go to another important theme in that book, which is the concept of difference. And that's on in chapter 7. In my opinion, I think this is one of the most provocative critiques you offer in that book, particularly, and I quote, the foundational status of difference in ethnomusicology. Okay, you critique the foundational discourse around difference in ethnomusicology and the claim that a handful of thematization of difference in Africanist ethnomusicology reflect a particular representational bias. That's on page 284. And I want to go further to outline some of the important ideas you rehearse in that chapter, which I think they are very, very important. The first one is a critique on the foundational status of difference in ethnomusicology, the idea of difference in terms of representation, whether difference is real, and also the political stance to urge a resistance to difference. And quickly, let me finalize on this. Yeah, so what is your take, particularly in this regard? Because I noticed many people responded to you in this context.
Yeah, so maybe I can be a little anecdotal in talking about difference. I didn't, when I was growing up in Ghana, you know, you grow up like other people. You speak a certain language, you go to schools, you have friends, and so on. You know, this was kind of a normal state of growing up in a plural society, but not necessarily thematizing difference in the way that I encountered when I eventually got to the US. Bode and I were talking last night about studying in the UK, you know, him going from Nigeria to England, me going from Ghana to England. And although I spent 4 years in the UK, I was not confronted with difference in the way that I was when I went to America. And I think the big factor there is race and the question of what you do with race, which is a very different thing from ethnicity. Of course, we are aware that we speak different languages. Ethnicity can have its consequences, and I'm sure I don't have to be, saying much about ethnicity here. But the race issue is dominant in American discourses, as I think we all know. So that on getting off that plane from London Heathrow to San Francisco back in, I won't tell you the year, but the first year that I got there, I was recategorized. It happened on the 7F bus. I remember it, just based on something that, you know, one of the fellow passengers did. So I was aware that, you know, something was now being thematized that was not necessarily, strong in my thinking up until that point. This is the background, and this is only something that I'm telling you now because I was trying to figure out why I had a strong aversion to that. But let me just make what I think is a more important point. If you are going out to go and study somebody else's music, it's very unlikely that you will come back and say, those people, they're just like us, you know? They have their big men, their small men. No, you have to manufacture a story of difference. So difference is built into the ethnomusicological, the anthropological project. These are things that scholars have written about, you know? So, and I didn't want to accept that premise. I think that there are impulses that drive music making that are widely shared, and that there are impulses that may be different. But you have to construct that difference. instead of working with the premise of difference. And I felt that some of the scholars who are writing about African music assumed that whatever it is, it just has to be different. People will risk their lives for this. They say it's self-evidently different from European music. And when you proceed along those lines, then you find the difference that you are looking for. It will now perpetuate itself. It will write itself. So I wanted to see difference emerge, from, and I took a more radical position by saying, let's begin with the premise of sameness and then see how difference emerges from this. I haven't changed my mind about that. And I think for the few years I have left, I don't know that I'm going to be changing my mind either.
So, if I may keep in. So let me play the devil's advocate now. There's an ideological foundation for the work of ethnomusicologists rooted in the concept of cultural relativism, that instead of using Western analytical framework for studying non-Western music, let us try to understand the unique nature of these other musical traditions, which inherently implies advocacy for difference. So there is that positive take on difference, but I also agree with you that eventually it became an imperialist, instrumental thing. So how would you refer to those kind of contradictory nuances of difference?
Yeah. So I think we should make a distinction between the analytical approach, okay, and the substance of the phenomenon itself that you're trying to characterize. Let me just say something about the analytical approach. So I think of an analysis as a technology. In fact, these days we're talking about analytical technologies. If a Shankarian approach or a motivic approach, will help me to understand a phenomenon, I will use it. It is not about the provenance of the analytical approach. It's about the result that you obtain. So if I have a sense, for example, that the Northern Ave songs I was listening to all have a certain shape. They begin high, the one that I was talking about in my text. And by this time, I'm down here. So I want to be able to convey something of that contour. Shanker's approach to analysis helps me to do that because I can graph it. I can show the gradual descent. Why am I going to worry about whether Shankar was a racist or whatever? I'm using it and I move on, So on the analytical level, if you think of it as a technology, then I think that will liberate you to use whatever technology, yes, enables you to explicate the structure that you're trying to explicate. Now, the other part, and this is the trickier part, is the phenomenon that you're trying to illuminate. What is it not in some way different? This is the question you're asking. I think difference is a construction. You construct the difference. So, yes, if you have a sense, but this is also something that I think you can begin with a premise of difference, but you may find that what you have revealed, at least analytically, shows shared features, shared approaches, shared whatever it is. There's difference at different levels, right? For example, for some people, Mozart and Haydn, they are very similar. They're 18th century composers and so on. Mozart and Steve Reich, they are very different, But for some people, Mozart and Haydn could not be more different. The more you get to know these music. So, that's what I mean. The difference is not self-evident. It's not given. It is constructed. So if you are thinking about what you want to show and at what level you are doing the analysis, then I think we have to leave it to you to be able to argue the difference based on your analytical proceeding.
Thank you, Prof. I think what we need to do now, I'm happy you took us to the next point from my 4-point analytical stage to engage this conversation, which is analysis. Is a key theme in that book. So, are you insinuating perhaps, or we should also analyze African music like Beethoven? Like Beethoven, or the same way we analyze Beethoven's symphony. Of course, people have been doing that, but the question is, you narrated and you provided some interesting perspective on how not to, analyze African music and how to, and also embedded in that concept is also, you also allude to how to analyze it. But the question is, many ethnomusicologists, I think that's where they sometimes disagree in quote with you. So no, it's not doing ethnography, it's not doing this. So the point is, where are you putting the context? If you just mentioned Schenkerian analysis now, so how do we blend things?
Okay, so let me just make it clear that we are dealing with phenomena that are huge, diversified, complex, that we approach them from different points of view. And so analysis is a very particular thing that some of us are interested in because we are curious about the inner workings of music. If you don't have that curiosity, nobody is forcing you to do analysis. Do whatever you want, But I feel, as a musician, that I want to know, why did you make this way? Why did you move in this direction? Why did you shape this way? When you did your variation, what made you choose that note and not this note? This is the curiosity that I have. And I will say that for a good number of analysts, some people used to joke that we are failed composers. We started off as composers, but we just never had that killer instinct that will make you a composer. So we ended up as analysts. But an analyst whose work is informed by some compositional understanding can contribute something to our understanding of these musical phenomena that we are dealing with. So for me to take just a small dirge and go through it note by note can be a useful thing, can show me something that probably I'm not aware of from a distance, But I do want to make it clear because sometimes, and I know we have some younger scholars here who at this point are probably quite overwhelmed by the number of possibilities there are for music study. And they're wondering, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? And I want to just say that it's a plural field. But once you latch on to what it is that you want to do, based on the curiosity that you have, then do it well. Do it as if there's nothing else. Just give it your all. So I know I'm in the father mode now, giving advice, but analysis, though, I think it's important. Now, you see the prejudice about analysis. If you say we should not look closely to see what's going on, are you saying that the thing itself it's not good enough, so don't waste your time trying to analyze? Or are you saying that there's another mode of analysis which will get us at what is truly going on? Now, if there's another mode of analysis, show us, So if I think that, looking at the lines or looking at a certain body of motivic work is, helpful, I will show that to you. But if you have an alternative, you show. But I fear that some of the arguments against analysis are about people who don't want to touch this music at all. So they just want the music to remain there, remain mystified, and that's not acceptable. Even the simplest game songs that we have. It's in my book, the African imagination in music, I would take simple songs and show you that what is going on metrically is really rather interesting. You know, we don't need to go into analysis here, but I'm just saying analysis has its rewards in illuminating the inner structure of music. Method, we can argue about method. Yeah, some people like motive, some people don't. Some people think we have polymeter. Some of us think we don't have polymeter, but we have polyrhythm, you know, and so on. These debates have been going on for a while. But the question is, do you just say the phenomenon should stay there, we shouldn't touch it, we shouldn't honor it with attention by looking at what's going on, or, you know, do we actually go down and get our hands dirty and so on? And I just feel that we actually have a lot to learn about. I still think we have a lot to learn about traditional African music, because there are incredible things that happen in a variety of this language and music thing we're talking about with, you know, chanting and the registers of voice that you're dealing with. These are all things that we have not exhausted those yet across the many languages that we have, you know, on the continent. So why shouldn't we be doing analysis? I don't. Again, it's not for everyone. It's not everyone who has the patience to do it, you know. And one last thing, and then I will really stop. But you are the one who provoked me into going on about analysis. One last thing is that, to me, and I may be wrong, and please tell me, there are some things that are easier to do than others. And I fear that sometimes our students choose the things that seem easy. If I come to you and I give you a theory and I say, go and do this, this, and that, and you bring it back and I verify and say you've applied it correctly, then that's the end of the matter. I give you an A, you're happy, you know. But there are some things that are not so easy because they don't have an end point. They involve probing, you know. So you keep going. That's why analysis doesn't have an end point. It has provisional endpoints. That is like when the deadline is there, or you need to submit it. You're up for promotion. So you know you can't spend another 2 years analyzing. Then you stop. But as long as you're engaging with this music critically, this is going to keep going. And I don't see any substitute for that kind of critical engagement, which is really an expression of your curiosity about the musical phenomenon.
Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. I think, yeah, I provoked you. Yeah, no. Yeah. So, and okay, let's move to the next one. Of course, the issues around analysis are ever evolving, and yeah, we can't finish them one of us. Perhaps we have questions from our colleagues when it's time for them to ask on that in that area. But now let's go to the theme around power relation. There's a theme, a recurring theme around power across the book, and that's for me is in chapter 1, chapter 3 also. And I'm going to read a few lines for us to provide a context. In chapter 1, for instance, you focus on discourse on colonialism and its impacts on African people and culture, particularly musical arts, and you engage this emergence of hybridized African cultures and identities. You also discuss introduction of new musical instruments, vocabularies, systems, and institutions. Then you also explain how this system and vocabularies disrupted old traditions and creatively facilitated and invented new ones. That's in chapter 1. Then in chapter 3, you build on this discourse by focusing on invention of the invention and representation of African rhythm as complex in chapter 3. Then I am going to quote you now on page 2. You mentioned that African-based scholars have little. Okay, that's for chapter 2, not really here. But the argument you make is the perhaps the cliche around complexity of African rhythm, and also perhaps how people think about African music. So again, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about this today, 23, 22 years after?
Yeah. So I think just speaking specifically to complexity, you can define a phenomenon as complex. You can define it as simple. It's a relational thing, right? So if you say something is complex, it's because you have a notion of something that is simpler. I think for us as scholars, even if your initial encounter with something is that it seems complex, you have to interrogate that complexity. You see? So, in what way is it complex? You don't say complex and then go home and sleep. You say complex and then you say, well, what is it actually going on? Then we're back to analysis. What's going on that will help me to understand that complexity? You know? And this is all the whole thing about African rhythm, the discourses which you know about, which, you know, from the earliest writings about African rhythm, it's always complex. I have students now, if I do a so-called 3-against-2 rhythm, they are lost. You know, they have no idea what to do. But some of that is from their programming. It's from what it is that they have been exposed to earlier. So about that specific thing, try to understand the basis of the complexity, you know. And the more you get into it, the more you see, and I claim that a lot of these drum ensemble, textures, they are rationally complex, you know. There's a rational complexity to these ensembles. But you can only show that by showing what the metrical framing is, how the rhythms complement one another, and so on and so forth. It's not, you don't just say complex and then go away. You know, you interrogate it. But I guess the thing that is driving a lot of this for me is curiosity about our own cultures, our own cultural phenomena, our own musics, our own songs. Just the curiosity that's going to lead us to better understanding. And for this, I have to also make a kind of broader sociological point, which is that it's a privilege to be in this line of work, as you know, to be a scholar. And it's a privilege to be able to get up in the morning and think and write, and then come home, have a dinner, and think and write, or whatever it is. If you accept that, then you accept, you know, there's a narrowing of what you do in life, of course, but it is also a way that enables you to live that life of the mind, if you like. And I think of myself as being in that category. If I were a policy maker, and this is why all these papers that end with recommendations seem to me really very alien. See, if I were a policy maker, that's a different thing. You have to come up with a policy because some educational, institution needs to establish a new curriculum and so on and so forth. That's a different enterprise from the unanchored, ongoing investigation that a certain line of scholarship does. You know, if you have premature application in mind, it's going to curtail what you do in terms of, you know, thinking through a phenomenon and so on. So these are just to recognize that there are different enterprises. That policy will necessarily mean some sort of pragmatic decision because we have to get the thing done. The syllabus has to be in place before the next semester starts and so on. I understand that. Those are important practical issues. But there is also a place for that ongoing scholarly thinking that never sleeps, so to speak, that just keeps going.
Thank you so much, Prof. I have one more question quickly, then I will hand over to Professor Omojola. Okay. I'm going to read a few things now, what I actually want to do. So what you just said now actually related me to the test itself. So let's go from the test for a while, then I'll hand over to. So on page 2, you argue that African-based scholars have little ideas of the cumulative resources available for study of their own music. That's the first point. Then in page 3, you went further to, solidify the claim. Now, the notion of, I read page 3, the notion of an irresistibly complex African rhythm has been promulgated by both Western and African scholars. Obenstell, Jones, and Women are of European origin. Inketia, Bebe, and Geho are African. It is therefore not simply a case of Western misrepresenting African music. Although, given the political and economic realities that have shaped the construction of the written archive of African music, and given the blatant asymmetries of power that the colonial encounter has produced, there are solid grounds for indulging in the politics of blame. Now, I see you addressing African scholars here.
Yes, and let's recall one of the things that we all have to do as scholars, which is to be balanced, right? You argue one side, think about the other side too. Think about the strongest arguments on the other side. And if you disagree with them, then say so and why you disagree. This dialectic is crucial. Not everyone practices dialectic. They found what they want, and then they go in that one door. But I feel that your scholarship is stronger if you recognize two sides, of the issue. So this theme of, African music is complex, African rhythm is complex, you can never understand it, and so on. This was a theme that was very common in European writing. Some of it, as I said, was just a retreat from having to deal with African rhythm, the mechanics of it. But because it is scholarship, because it's in the books, because it's in the books that some of us Africans read, we are also saying the same thing. We are echoing this thing because it was said by Jones or by Hornbostel and so on. And I felt that it was important, because, there are critics out there looking at every word you write, ready to pounce on you because they will think that you are not being balanced in your critique. And I just felt that it was important to point out that, yes, there are African scholars who've promulgated this idea, which originates in European discourse. That's all. But I don't leave it there because there are a lot of asymmetries in sort of scholarly, in the kind of scholarly world that we live in. And you should just point out that, that these asymmetries exist. So I'll leave it there, but that's an issue that will come up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. Sorry, thank you, Professor Agawu.
Yeah, right.
And I'm saying this not that you will be so lean-headed or anything. I don't know of any other scholar in the world wearing multiple hats the way you wear them. You're at home with Brahms, you're at home with Fela, you're at home with Northern heavy music. I think someone told me once that there was a conference that was holding somewhere, and I can't remember whether it was on Brahms, and the conference would not start because maybe you were late or something. You had the key to that symposium. So how do you reconcile the demands of ethnomusicology? You've done some ethnomusicological work, ethnographic, maybe I should use the more technical, ethnographic work, analytical work, and traverse different musical boundaries in such a way that has attracted the attention of the world. I went for a conference in Germany many years ago, and representing African music had just come out. And they were talking, people were, maybe somebody was talking about Ethiopian music and there's a problem the scholar is facing, then they will say, go and read Agawu's representation, I was so proud to get up and let them know that I'm Professor Agawu's friend. You know, you can see how I'm dropping names. Yesterday was the German Stockhausen that, So I wanted to respond. How do you manage these multiple spaces, multiple approaches, multiple methodologies in a way that people feel that you have succeeded significantly in all of them?
Well, first of all, thank you for admitting that you and I drink beer together in the evenings. And
I didn't say that.
but you implied that. Yes. No, I don't think there's any mystery to it. In my language, we say "owigo amapiane oerasama brane." The time that you are in, its thing is what you do. The time that you are in, its thing, that time's thing is what you do. When I went to school, we learned things just like all of us. You do your arithmetic, you do your what do you call it? You do your math, you do your music, you do your economics, and so on and so forth. So I went through the school system. But one thing I will say is that there was a time when I thought I was going to be a composer, foolishly. And so all of my undergraduate years, I was composing. And by the way, Akinyuba is wrong when he describes me in his book on Nketia as a non-composing musicologist. He says that I'm, one of the non-composing African musicologists. All the others compose, right? But the issue is this: I was composing all the way through my undergraduate years, and even in my graduate years, I was composing. And I have manuscripts of these attempts, which are sitting in my study. But I never thought that the compositions were sophisticated enough. Someday, if there is time, I'll have you listen to some of these and you can tell me. Although I have to tell you, I had my son put these in finale a couple of years ago, and he says, "Dad, did you really write this one? This harmony is cool." So anyway, I have at least one fan. But but what I'm yeah, right, yeah. I knew you would say that. I'm not gonna But no, what I'm getting at though is that I think there was a certain amount of self-criticism, that made me put this aside. But on the other hand, the analytical, theoretical issues also became very interesting to me. So they pulled me in that direction. Now, for me, it didn't matter what the piece was. If it's a Schumann song and you are taking singing lessons, which I did for a number of years too, I know you won't believe it, and you're curious about the way this song is working, you look at it. You sing it again and again, you imagine this, you read about it, you do your harmonic analysis, your melodic analysis. It would never have occurred to me to come with some sort of ideological, or to construct something that's going to now say, yes, you should look at this because you're an Akpafu, you grew up here, and so this is what you should do. That never was an issue for me. I thought if I write a good essay on the Schumann songs, there's a journal that publishes analysis, I'm sending it there. If I write a good thing on Ave Dirges, there's a journal out there, I send it there. That's the only way that I operated, And for better or worse, I understood that as scholars, we needed to write. Sometimes students will ask me, so what about teaching and what about writing? How do you balance the two? I told them, look, I've come from a long way. These are my American students. I came a long way from here. I'm coming here to do my research and write. Teaching can take care of itself. Now, and I say that, and I don't mean that, as any kind of advice or any kind of exhortation, but some prioritization had to take place, But the challenges of writing, especially for those of us who are not native speakers of the language, we don't know some of the protocol, we have to learn these things, sometimes learn them the hard way, These are immense, But I accepted them because I enjoyed doing that kind of work, getting articles rejected all the time. I have a file which is very thick in my office. I printed out all these reject letters that I got from the beginning, trying to get an article in this journal or that journal. I always went to the top journals, by the way. So, you don't start with a small fry. You go to the top journal, and then that's where you see some very serious ideological things taking place, where somebody just doesn't like the fact that you use the word cadence in talking about African music, and they will say they should reject the article. Because do the people have a word for cadence? And so if they don't, then why are you using that? That's an imposition. So what I'm getting at, if there's anything you should compliment me about, is just that I stayed the course. So that's the way it's been for me. I enjoy, different musics based on what I grew up learning, knowing, listening to, and so on. And that's what I've done. I wish I had a more profound explanation, but there really isn't one. If I can tell you what I've been doing lately, or maybe this will summarize it for you. So at the Graduate Center where I teach, I have several seminars that I teach, but I only teach one of them each year. On the African side, I teach a seminar called African Tone Systems. I teach another seminar called African Rhythm, and then I teach a seminar called African Art Music. Those are the three seminars that I teach, one after another, but just one of those each semester. And then on the European side, I teach a seminar on closure in music, how pieces of music end. We're all talking about beginnings and so on and so on, but what about endings? What happens at the ending of a piece? And so that's actually, if I may say so, that's one of the courses that attracts a lot of students, talking about ending. Because what they don't know is that they see me, my write-up says we're going to talk about closure, but the only way you can know what happens at the end is to know what happened at the beginning. So before they realize, we're actually looking at the whole form. Yeah, but paying attention to endings of phrases, endings of sections, and then ending of the piece. Closure. So I do that. I do a seminar on semiotics. I do a seminar on comparative analysis. And that's in the same spirit that we're talking about. We compare analyses. Reti, has analyzed Beethoven. Shankar has analyzed Beethoven. Who is saying what? And who has the truth? But don't say that. Just don't talk about truth. And so those are the seminars that I've been teaching. I've been teaching them for a long time now, as you know. So I don't have to prepare too hard.
Exactly, yeah. One more question. I know we're running out of time. And this is a question, I think you already touched on it, and I'm trying to see how we could respond to the needs and challenges of our students. I've met a number of students, even here. We discuss writing and so on and so forth in an informal way. So if you could speak kind of generally on, one, the challenge of writing, two, where to publish, and three, the use of AI.
Okay.
Because, sorry, I've seen a student say, yes, I've done it. AI did it for me. I say, yeah, not here. In the US, where, yeah.
Well, let me start with AI because I have the least to say about AI. I know you're all versed in this world. I'm only now beginning to understand a little bit of what AI does. So I don't have anything particularly interesting or significant to say about AI, except that it is with us and that we should learn to work with AI. That's it. There's a group of African music scholars. We meet periodically, and at our last meet in the US, that is, and at our last meeting, the topic was AI and what to do with it. We had a very interesting discussion, but I'm afraid that's not something that I have anything important to say about it. The two other issues, one was writing and where to publish. So for me, writing is labor, you know. I labor over writing. I will have others read what I write. It's almost never anything that I write that I don't send to either one of my students to read, or one of my colleagues if they're not too busy. But somebody has to look over this and say, this is going well, or, you're getting distracted here. But the more important thing, and this is what you learn from publishing in refereed journals, especially if they're good journals, and you get very good readers' reports, which I have to say I'm privileged to have received some, excellent readers' reports. These are some of the top journals: Music Theory Spectrum, Journal of Music Theory, the Journal of the American Musicological Society, things like that, where somebody is going to town on your article, looking at every comma, and every period. When these reports come in, you cry for a while, you get annoyed for a while, you start to scream, they didn't understand this, who is this,
And they're not there to hear you anyway.
Yes. Then you calm down and realize that when the article appears, nobody knows what has transpired before that, So if there is something in a reader's report that is helpful for you, take it and humbly incorporate it into your revision. So that's one thing, to revise what you write. Your first draft is not going to be the final draft. And that's why you shouldn't be writing your papers the night before the conference or the night before you submit the thing. Write the thing well ahead of time, rehearse it, let somebody else read it. Find the time for that. If you want to do the scholarly thing, So but I will tell you one other thing, this is not necessarily our problem. I think it's a more global problem. But sometimes we talk too much. And sometimes concision can be very helpful. And just anecdotally, years ago, I wrote an article on Mahler's 10th Symphony. And, I was a young scholar at the time. It was about, 40-page article, which I typed, of course. That's what we did in those days. And it had like 73 footnotes. And I sent this to a journal, and they sent it back. They said, oh, your article has some interesting notions. It's 40 pages plus another how many pages of notes, but we can only publish a 15-page article. So we like your subject, but these 40 pages, you have to reduce them to 15 pages. That was the best thing they did for me. Because you come back now and ask yourself, what am I really saying in this paragraph? What is essential here? You're looking at your nicely turned phrases that you are so proud to have written, and you're meant to be asking, what is essential here? So I got it down. I didn't get to 15. I got to 18. But I returned the article, and I know that article exists. It's in a journal called 19th Century Music. But what I'm saying is that this was very good advice that I was given, to be concise, And an article doesn't mean you write everything you know about the subject. You write what advances our understanding of the issue as you have framed it. If you frame the issue in a way, in a very, strong way, and then your article shows how we've dealt with that issue. Let me just, since we're on the mechanics of writing, there's another thing that I know that students that I encounter at Legon at the University of Ghana at Legon have trouble with. This thing they call literature review, and which shows up sometimes in the kinds of footnotes that we write in our articles. Okay. So a review of the literature should not be some mundane thing where you're saying in chapter 1 they said this, in chapter 2 they said this, and so on. That's boring. A review of the literature, and here you have to be in the picture. The review of the literature is meant to show us what preceded your work and why your work is the next stage in advancing this way of thinking. Okay? So you don't just say because, there's Hornbus in 1920, there's Jones in 1950, there's Anku in 1980, and so on. Yeah, you should read those things, but what is it there that leads to the subsequent author and that makes your own contribution inevitable? You see? So that one is also work. All of these things involve some work and some thought if you're reviewing a literature. I know that some students find it, or some of them haven't read the article. The AI reads it for them and tells them what it is. And one thing, please, don't cite anything that you have not read. It really is not good because, especially if you're relying on, I said I wouldn't talk about AI, but if you are relying on AI to be giving you citations and telling you other things, there will be something that is manufactured there that's going to trip you. And then you realize that this publication that you're waxing eloquent about actually doesn't exist. Yeah, but in any case, do at the very least try to verify these things, even if you rely on them for help. But citing things that you haven't read, a seasoned scholar will know that, because chances are that they have read the article and you are claiming to have read it, but we can see that your paper is in no way informed by that article. So I urge the lecturers among you to also be vigilant in looking at the kinds of things our students are saying that they have. Have you actually read this? So why are you citing it? Anyway.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over now back to Dr. Ayorinde. Okay.
Thanks so much, Prof. Okay, I'm happy that Professor Omojola took us to that route, which is very, very important, and it's something that I have been thinking also. So I'm going to advance from that with two more questions. One from me, then one from a colleague who also happened to be in the spirit with us. So in the last, of course, we engage with students here, and most of the things we discuss often, literature, presentation, what to read, how to do scholarship. I'm sure, and I'm happy you have seen some of our students. Of course, they are work in progress. Yeah, but I want to advance from that angle. So my first point is around the idea of, doing scholarship. Then by that I mean issues of article you have addressed, but presentation. How do we present? And let me start from the question from a colleague. So I've been thinking about it, but yesterday, and it just come from a colleague just called and said, look, tomorrow I might not be there, but I really want us to engage this, which is one of us. And I'm going to say, it's not my idea, it's Alaba's, Ilisomi's idea. He called me last night and asked me let's think about this, So thank you, Alaba. If you're online, fine, I'm happy. But if you're not there, I'm going to deliver your message to Professor Agawu and to the house. Let me bring out the message so we can quickly get it. So I'm going to read. I will invite Professor Agawu to reflect on the different paper presentations throughout the week and share what gives him hope about the future of African musicology. Additionally, as mentoring opportunity, he could talk about specific concerns and issues, including writing, the intellectual depth of works, project designs, and more. That's from Alaba. After this, I will now bring in mine. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say, but just briefly, I have thoroughly enjoyed the presentations that I have heard this week. They've been a lot, and there hasn't been a lot of space to reflect on each individual paper, but to the extent that I understood some of what was going on, I think they've been great, and I've really enjoyed them. So I applaud all of you who've presented this week. Yeah, they open up all kinds of issues. If I may, though, point out that there is a recurring template that is used in papers. Inevitably, there will be an introduction, statement of the problem, research questions, and so on, and then a recommendation, methodology, and so on and so forth. I personally, and based on the kind of environments, the conference environments that I find myself in, 20 minutes is a very short period of time. And so when I come to hear a 20-minute paper, I assume that you have gone through the template. Don't read me the template. I'm not interested in the template. I want the meaty part of what you've come up with. You know? So sometimes the background things, and I saw this in a few papers, by the time the person has set up their background, they're already 15 minutes into the paper. Then you only have 5 minutes at the end to rush through those so-called findings. Start with the findings, or focus on the findings. Foreground that which is novel in what you have done in the research. You are not here to prove to us that you have followed a template as a scholar. These templates are all over the place. So again, I may be saying something that's different from what your lecturers tell you, so do argue against it. But I'm just saying that in the kind of conference environments that I've been in, minimize the setting up of the paper in terms of prior things, and focus on the significance of the work that you have done. You know, showcase the results of your research. So that would be my response on what has transpired this week to Alaba. What else was I supposed to?
Yes, I think the second one is from me, which I want to say now.
Oh, okay.
Still building on that one. Yeah, Prof, yes, I understand that different institutions have particular ways of doing scholarship, presentation, and research. Also, well, in the context of representing African music today, we also need to be conversant with what is obtainable, what is acceptable in quotes that enables us, like a technology that helps us, that enhances our capacity to represent African music today. We spoke about theory, Schenkerian analysis. If it works for us, I can use it works for me. If Bodio works for me to talk about indigenous music praxis and epistemology, I will use it. Yeah, so those are technology. Another technology in this case is what you just mentioned now. And I want to give a very, very basic example. So I want to open it to everyone, and I know you can help us address it. What does it mean? Why? I've also had discourse with scholars, particularly within our context here. When we present, there's this argument around positionality. Now, I'm going to give two instances now. The personal pronoun in musicology or ethnomusicology sometimes is welcome. But in musicology, sometimes we write in second person or first person. Yeah, but I have seen another one particularly in our environment here, the third person. This scholar went to field, and this scholar is doing this and this and this. That's the first one. Of course, I'm opening it. But what I think is, if the scholar has gone to the field and done the work, why would the scholar now cover his or herself and now put herself as a team and point to his or herself as this scholar has done this scholar has gone to this? Or we speaking in, yeah. So that is one. Okay, I think you should respond to that.
Yeah,
then
and that I think can be addressed relatively straightforwardly by asking which context am I writing for? What are the conventions within that context? So let's say, because Bode, you also brought up the question of which journals, for example, give an example, should you publish in? Well, you should publish in the best journals that will secure you tenure or promotion or whatever it is, right? Or at least start at the top. And if you get rejected, then you can tumble down, which I have done a number of times, and I know other people have done. But the issue is this. I don't know how many of our students spend time looking at the venues that they want to publish in. You know, one of the things that I loved to do as a graduate student, I did this on Friday afternoons. I would go to the library, because in those days, we could not access these things online, right? But I would go to the library and look at as many of the current periodicals as there were that publish things on music, you know? What is musical quarterly publishing? What is ethnomusicology publishing? What is African studies publishing? Just to skim to see. Invariably, I'll find one article here or one article there that actually is of interest to me, you know? And of course, again, just to show you the difference in labor, we would have to then photocopy that article at great expense and take it home and read it. And then the photocopy will fade anyway after a few years. But that knowing the venues where you want to publish, this is very important. Now, the problem is that because so much now is kept as soft copies, many people, they don't even know what the book looks like. I noticed that you are quoting from page this, and you keep saying page 2, page 2, page 2. But these are, of course, the individually paginated chapters from the book, you know? Whereas actually what you're calling page 2 of chapter 2 is page 33, you know, of the original book. But that is probably unavoidable. More important, though, is knowing this terrain. What are these journals? What have they published before? In fact, sometimes, if you begin an article or somewhere in the beginning, you're able to show that you are building on something that has been discussed previously in that journal, you know, if not in the field that you're talking about. And this is a good conceit to have in mind, that recent debates about, I don't know, positionality, to come to that term, but, you know, have foregrounded this, and that. In this article, I will, you know, then you're plugging into an existing conversation. This is also helpful to do. So positionality, I'm afraid, is just one of those terms that now it's aggressively looking you in the face. And I run away from it in part because it to me, it suggests a kind of identity construction of the sort that I just simply don't believe is relevant. You know, which parts of your identity are you going to be now putting in when you construct your positionality in that one paragraph, you know? And how does that then script you for the reader? You're now saying to the reader, read me through this lens. Why? You know? It's actually a much more complex issue than what I think some of the arguments about positionality have presented. Again, I think there are two sides to this, but probably you want to weigh in on this question of positionality.
I think you said it well. I think you said it all. I just do what I need to do based on whatever theoretical perspective. And as you rightly said, even those, at times, theoretical perspectives emerge from what you've done. And the people who are reading it already know where you're coming from. I do understand when students are doing presentations because we are trying to discipline them, so it's good for them to talk, you know, state their theoretical perspective. Are people listening to this online? Okay, so I won't say what I wanted to say. Yeah, so at some point in your career, and depending where you are, right, if you are publishing in SCM journal, for example, some of those theoretical perspectives, everybody knows them, and they are inherent in what you do. You may mention them briefly. At this level, I think it's good for you to demonstrate that you have a good knowledge of that. But I think, for me, you know, some of my graduate students at UMass, I usually will tell them, engage with the material to start with. So if you're studying, I don't know, away music, go and engage with away music. Be reading, be doing your reading. But don't decide yet. It shouldn't be theory first and material. Yeah, because when you do that, you are reinforcing what we say we should run away from. For example, you are helping to colonize our music, especially if those perspectives are foreign. That does not mean that there are many Western perspectives that apply to us. Like some of the people, the ones they use, some of our students did there during the week. They were fine, even though they weren't written by African authors. But go and engage with the material. What do you feel? So what you feel, you may think is not important. It's important. You feel, one of the presenters said when she first heard the music, she didn't like it. That's good, that's honest. So how do you feel about the music? What is it telling you? Write it down, no matter incoherent it may look. Just write it down. The more you think, and then when you're reading, then you can say, oh, okay, this particular theory seems to, maybe it's about alienation. You can then use it to relate to how you first engage the music. So deal with the material first. Understand it. But between your reading, and then later on, now see whether there is any of those theoretical perspectives that resonate with what you're doing. Or it could be, well, this person did this person did this, none of them really apply to me, so I'm going to modify this perspective and use it the way that I'm using. That's creative, that's innovative. But it shouldn't be straightforward, but Omojola said this, and then you just put it on your own. It may not work, So I hope you are getting my point. It's not that theory is not good, but let it be theory that you feel is relevant after you have sufficiently engaged with the material itself. And that, you cannot miss that one. And I love writing, reading essays, and the student say, or the author says, yeah, this is good. I'll take this little part of that theory. I'll take this little part of it, and then I'm creating my own in a way that resonates with my work. So it should be a nuanced approach to the use of theory.
Yeah, I would just like to reinforce what Bode just said, and maybe just add a little bit to it by saying that what you want is your work to be informed by theory. You want someone to read this work and say, yes, this work is informed by theory. It's not, let me have a placard that says I have read theory, at the beginning, so that you can be impressed with me, that I know the title, but rather that your work is informed by theory. And some of that comes from giving the emphasis, as Bode was just explaining, to the material itself. Remember that state of innocence is not actually a state of innocence that you are just going looking at the material, because you already are theoretically constituted. All of us are theoretically constituted because we play music, we compose it. There is already theory sedimented in us. It may be that it has not been made explicit, and sometimes you encounter a theory which you then realize, oh, this is what I've been doing all along, But of course, that person got there first because they published there first before you got there. So you have to cite them, But that if you think of your work as being informed by theory, it's your work informed by theory, then maybe that will liberate you from what sometimes seems like a burden just to display your theoretical, credential.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thanks so much, Professor Omojola. Now, the last point now, again, I'm asking this question. These are, I think they are practical questions, and to address some of the things we see almost every day, particularly in this part of the world. And I'm happy we have people across the environment here who, this is more like a mediation kind of question, what I want to ask now. So apart from I spoke about presentation idea. Now, there's another one which I also think is good if you can help us. like I have a few experiences here and there, though I'm still growing. So I am trained for presentation, for prepping. Before I go out to present, my professors will sit, three of them, come and present. And by the time I'm ready to prep locally, before even going for the conference presentation, my script will be ready, well marked, and the slide will be ready. Then I send in both material to them, and they give me date for prep. When I get to the prep, I know what to do. I am meant to read my talk. I need to read my talk and everything aligned with the slide. I am not asked to speak to my slide. I'm not asked to just improvise and just talk about it. So I am meant to have practiced it's not a paper, it is a talk. So I'm meant to script my talk the way scripting anecdotes, scripting this. I was given freedom, but to script everything so it won't be disorganized when I appear, because they believe I represent the institution and I can't go out and do things anyhow. So that's it. But coming to things around here now, when in most cases people have challenged me that our students are following that pattern, for instance here, because they can't go out without, they do that same pattern. Yeah, not speaker's note, it's the presentation, not slide speaker's note. It is the first thing is to write the paper, the talk. The one is, for instance, for a 20-minute presentation, it is the presentation is 1,200 word count for 17 minutes, 18 minutes. Yeah, it is timed. Yeah. So then we prepare a slide, not too much for, let's say 15 slides for a 1,300 word count. That is for 20 minutes presentation. Timing. Mass, I will finish by 18 minutes. Or if I am slow at reading sometimes, I can be done by 19 minutes, 30-something seconds. So the next 10 minutes is available for discussion. But now, around here, people have criticized this approach seriously, saying, no, that is not how we do it. How we do it is that prepare the slide, speak to your slide, just improvise. And I find it I'm confused. Maybe you can help us.
So when I went when I got this job in the United States many years ago, that was the first thing that shocked me. You go to a conference, everything is well written, and they read it. And I would be trying to speak to my notes. And then I discovered that I don't have enough time, that sort of thing. So write your paper out and read it about 20 times to time yourself. And every little thing that you want to say, write it down. And go there and deliver it as if you are playing a piano piece. That is the way to succeed. If you are saying, I will speak to, maybe Shoyinka could speak to his notes, right? Or Prof. Agawu could speak to his notes, but you could see he didn't speak to his, he read it. I read those little jokes I was cracking about the German composer, is written down. It's written down. When the preamble, my gratitude goes to the chancellor, is written down with full stop and comma everywhere. So write your paper and read it thoroughly and time it thoroughly. That is the only way you can succeed. Don't go and be speaking to your notes. As I said, some, senior professors may do that, and then it depends on the context. Okay, Shoyinka may do that. But you as students and lecturers, and even as you saw with senior professors, write your paper out and go and deliver as if you are playing a Chopin piece. Thank you.
Yeah, I can only agree with that, and I applaud the practice that you have, the way that you are training your students to do it. Think of it also in this way. If you are at a conference and you have 20 minutes to present a paper, you are not known let us say, right, maybe this is your first paper, your second paper, you want to give the best impression of yourself. You don't want to fumble, you know, because, if you go and you mess up, as we say in the US, people will remember that you messed up. They say, oh, this is a person who came, he was so disorganized and that sort of thing. So treat it as a privilege where you get to introduce your best scholarly self to your audience, and write these things down. It's not going to harm you in any way to actually go through the labor, even if you think you know the thing so well. You're not in a classroom. That's different. If you're teaching in a classroom, sometimes you go back and forth, you repeat things, you get distracted, and so on. That's a different kind of interaction. But for a formal presentation, and I would just add, because I'm interested to hear that you're doing this, we do exactly the same thing at the Graduate Center. In fact, in my department, the theory department at the Graduate Center, you are not allowed to go and give a paper at any conference, minor or major, without us vetting your presentation. We will make time, especially now that we can do things on Zoom. The faculty will make time to listen to your presentation, sometimes more than once, And the feedback involves not just the content of the paper, although of course sometimes we do, but the nature of the presentation. Sometimes people spend time, and I noticed this happened here too, which is good. Pronunciation, you're pronouncing in some Italian words, you're getting the consonants mixed up. Somebody will just, gently, we are learning, and why wouldn't you want to do the right thing? But really treat that moment that you have, that 20-minute moment, as a special moment where you're going to go and deliver your very best.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Okay. Okay.
Do they have questions or something?
Yes, definitely. I just want to say now that we have addressed the paper thing, speak to your slide. I hope we understand and we won't come back to it again. Thank you. Yeah. Then now we now need to open the floor. We have, let's say, about 25 minutes, say, for Q&A. 25 minutes for Q&A. This one is for us. I was saying 25 minutes now. Okay, yes, perhaps I should stand so I can see. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Can we take 5 to start with? I can see 1. I can see Dr. Loroti. 2. Let's use regional. We have 2 from this southwest now. Let's go to Port Harcourt or other side. Dr. Authority. Can we have one from the east? Anybody from the east now still available, still around? Sorry, pardon me, I'm not trying to be, I just want to balance perspective. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we have DBO. Of course, I'll call my HOD now. What is that? Okay, so let's start from Dr. Albert Authority.
Doctor, let them make it brief.
Yeah, but it's the mic.
Ayo. Let them make it brief because.
Okay. Please, before you start please, time is very important, and you can see what we've been going through. Please just go straight to the point and hit the point as soon as possible. Thank you.
collected 4 in a day. And it's like, when do I say that?
Just go to church and pray.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Let's have DBO now.
Sorry. The new technology says I can speak.
Okay,
now, thank you very much, Prof. I think I want to further the discourse of this speak to slide. I want to create another context, which is a little bit different. Now, I know my students. The committee knows the students. But in this space, we have a situation where people copy papers. But I know, I've studied my students, I know he or she didn't know. But while presenting in the bigger space, like in the PG school, they want to know who wrote the paper. And the only way they could know who wrote the paper is not by reading, but by discussing the paper. That's just the difference.
Well, so that's a different problem now. Plagiarism.
Yes.
People should not plagiarize. So your students should not plagiarize. So tell them not to plagiarize. If they plagiarize, they will be in trouble. Okay, it's a different problem. And some people are very good at cramming things, though. They just cram. They might even make gestures to it to think they might even embody stolen text. And you will think they are the one who wrote it. So yeah, that's a different problem that has to be resolved on its own. But for efficacy, for efficiency, they should prepare. And when they are preparing, they are writing. You know, you can see whether, even pronunciation, when you prepare that thing, you look at certain words that you have to rehearse. But if you are just there, you might make a mistake. You might make it, and that, as Professor Agawu has said, and people will be remembering you with that mistake. So you don't want to take any chances. It's like somebody who wants to play Chopin, and he wants to be improvising Chopin. You know, you learn it very well. You go there, you deliver it. Sight reading is different. So let them prepare and deliver it. Don't speak to your paper. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's not intimidate our younger scholars and expect them to be perfect. You know, you prepare your paper because you understand the material, and you should be prepared for any and all questions that are thrown at you. Sometimes some questions will be difficult. You won't be able to answer them, or you don't know the answer. And be honest. Just say, oh, I will look into this later on. This is one that is a little difficult. I think it's a cultural thing. Hard for us to just say, oh, I don't know. I never thought about that. You know, I'm saying I don't know 10 times every seminar that I go in. And I've been teaching this course now for 20 years, but I'm saying I don't know, because my students have read about some things that I don't know, you know. But there's no shame in that. Of course, if what you don't know is absolutely central to the topic, then you haven't done your preparation well, or you have not been advised properly or comprehensively or rigorously. We should put the blame not only on the student, but also on their supervisors, you know. So, but I don't want the students to feel that, you know, they have to be perfect when they show up for that. No, you have to have something to say, you deliver it confidently, be prepared for things to be thrown at you, and, you know, you withstand it. That's going to be your life. It's, you know, I get this all the time. Every time I give a lecture, somebody will ask me a nasty question somewhere. But I know what to say back to them. So. And just on the journal thing, since you brought it up, yeah, I think this is a bigger structural problem about the existence of journals. I will say that if it is a journal worth its salt, it will often tell you the basis for a rejection. In other words, they will explain to you, or maybe even give you a report that suggests where you might improve things. Sometimes that is helpful, and you just take your time, work your way through it. As for journals on the continent, yes, we have the limited number of things, but I tend to think of a journal that is obviously, I would like it to be a prestigious journal, but more important, that is a good place for me to put that particular material, you know? So if African music, you know, the journal African Music, you know, seems like the best place, yes, I go there. If ethnomusicology seems like the best place, I'll go there. I have to say, and I don't have scientific evidence for this, but there are many publishing opportunities these days. You know, that's my impression, that the place is swimming with journals. Now, there's some very dubious ones, you know, among them. And you want to be very careful, especially if they're asking you to pay, you know, in order to have your article published. Then you have to wonder about that. So, yeah, I don't know what we do about the institutional problem of creating journals and new journals, but match your work with a journal that, you know, that will give it prominence and that's suitable. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Agawu. I just wanted to add that the reasons why journals have declined is because they're asking for money. So once you pay, you must publish my article. I've paid 10,000 naira. You now say somebody rejected, there will be trouble. So if they can stop that, you know, but I know there are challenges, they need money to publish the journal, but, you know, African Studies, there's a journal in African Studies that used to be one of the best in the world. Institute of African Studies, UI. It was one of the topmost. You know, I don't know whether they're still publishing it. And then talking about rejection. Rejection should be good news. The article that I published in the British Journal of Forum for Ethnomusicology, when the report came, somebody said, this is okay. This other person said, this is horrible. So the person wrote about 18 pages. My article was about 20 pages. So, you know, I will call Kofi, you know, and Kofi will say, yeah. Did they say you can't resubmit? I said, I can resubmit, but every page, you know. So, Kofi, Professor Yuba said, no, yeah, you know, do the correction. So I told my wife, I need the dining table. So, yes. So I displayed all those pages, So after eating, okay, this one, bam. So 19 pages, 19 days. When I was done, I sent it back. It's published. Now, when you see it now, you'll be saying, that Omojola is brilliant. So that's why I said rejection at times could provide you an opportunity to improve the quality. Don't run away from it. Deal with it. Yeah.
Just a footnote to that. Then I will invite Dr. Laurenti. Now, I was waiting for you to mention it, but maybe. You said we don't have. I want to go back historically. In the 70s, or let me say from my own reading, there was a time I was trying to look for some materials on works of Ayabankole, and I came online at one of the digital archive of one of the university, particularly Indiana University, and I saw that in the 70s goes to 80. Philip Bowman, one of the world leading musicologists, ethnomusicologists today, published in Ife Music. Akinwuba was the editor.
Yeah.
So where is that culture today? So where is that culture today? That is to answer your question. That's your question. So quality assurance. That is what the professor said. Quality is everything that has been explained today. That is the solution to bringing back that standard. Yes. So, Dr. Laurenti, please.
Thank you. I assume that Professor Omojola has muted me. Because he muted me a few days ago.
You mean on me?
Thank you, sir. How about the breaking point?
should we embrace the fact that composition, scholarship, online, okay. Should we embrace what is going, what I perceive to be going on, I might be wrong, composition scholarship, performance scholarship, perhaps these brands of scholarship are going into extinction in Africa. Even all through today alone, I felt left out. We've been receiving a lot of support in terms of how to present our papers, how to be a researcher, how to be this and that. And yet, on this continent, we still don't understand the meaning of composition scholarship, performance scholarship. Who is a composer scholar? What does it do? A performance scholar, what does it do? I have in this room organists, pianists, singers, who have forgotten all about that because they've gotten into the university and all they're doing is writing papers. Now, Professor Agawu hinted at something which I am thinking maybe that is the problem. That is the problem with analysis, music analysis, and scholars shying away. And I can share this from my experience teaching composition and running a private studio. I'm at a point where I'm thinking maybe I should embrace this. Because once it comes to music analysis, everybody runs away. And here I'm thinking, how did we get into composition? It started with analysis through composition. I was even lucky I studied with Nicholas Cook. So, and there's the issue of, can we teach composition? Maybe not. But the way composition is studied is through analysis. And it's one thing that we are shying away from in Africa. And here I am, I'm saying maybe the reason is this. In our DNA, music traditionally, is based on intuition, improvisation. We don't go into analysis. Music just occurs. It just occurs. And right now we have a lot of composers who are writing from the point of intuition. And then their composition lacks depth, lacks coherence. And yet we are shying away from this. So I'm now thinking maybe we should say we are Africans. Let's forget about that level of thinking and just see how we can improve ourselves. Because that problem with analysis is there. So that's why I say I'm at a breaking point. And then people like me are not even getting help. People in this room, we are not getting help. So should we say goodbye to composition scholarship? And there's a new trend. Maybe it's a change, a paradigm change. People are now thinking that a composer scholar is somebody who writes music anyhow and publishes a paper on it. Whereas there's what we call true music scholarship, composition scholarship research, in which you research a lot of things, and just like you create theoretical framework for the papers you write, it can take you a year to create a theoretical framework to compose just one music. But we are not functioning at that level. Should we just forget it?
Yeah, should I respond to that? So I think the problem that you're bringing up is partly an institutional problem. It is, what do you have to do as an undergraduate to get a degree from this institution? Is composition part of what you are required to do? That is a curriculum issue, and I know that in Ghana we have a similar issue. Not so much. There are one or two like Adakwe who spoke to us yesterday is a composer, theorist, and so on. There is a place for composition in the curriculum. I completely agree with you. In fact, when I was a student, and I still kind of subscribe to this, if you had to rank the different things we do as musicians, composition was always number one. Because without the composers, the rest of us, we're just parasites. You know? What are you going to do? You're a musicologist, but where are the compositions that you are studying? What are you going to do? You're a performer, but which composer? So the composer is number one. You know? The musicologist in my day was like at the bottom. You know? The performer was very close up there. But there's an institutional thing that you have to consider. Who has what skills to teach composition? I would just say there are two things going on. One is what in my day, again, we called free composition, which is where the individual simply composed. And they were guided, you know, but they were not, they were given tasks to help them along. It's like you do your exercises to strengthen your ability. So that's one style of composition. And the other, which was compulsory all through my undergraduate years, is what in England they call pastiche composition, where you are being taught to write in the style of. So every one of us in this program should be able to write a small piano piece in the style of Uzoigwe. You learn Uzoigwe well enough to be able to write a piano piece that sort of sounds like it. It's an amazing exercise because it will bring you, into the Uzoigwe sphere. You can distill what he does, and you actually get to exercise a little bit, of your creative abilities in that realm. That was a course that we took. It's a course that I have taught many, many years. In fact, one year I was teaching that course, and we got to Brahms, and I said the students should write an intermezzo in the style of Brahms, and so they did. And then one of the students said, Professor, but can you show us? Can you bring your own intermezzo next week? And I showed up with an intermezzo. I have to say, it wasn't great. But it was a humbling moment. But in any case, it's a learning procedure. So those two things. But the main thing is, are they in your curriculum? And the only other thing that I worry about when we make the kind of global things is, sometimes it's good to just think locally. Think, what can I do? What is it we learned in Sunday school? Brighten the corner where you are. What can I do in my little corner to advance this thing? And not to be dissuaded by whatever the perceived global trend is. I know we're all in touch with the globe now because you're all looking at TikTok and so on and so forth. But if you are taking your cues from outside instead of, looking within to say what can be done here, I think you may be discouraged from pursuing what you know to be right and to be helpful. So, anyway, I'll leave it there.
I think you said it all. One other point that Ayo made is how other forms of research are being marginalized. In all the 5 schools where I teach, composers don't have to write any paper. They just compose and they get their promotion. Performer, you composed, it's performed, that's it. It's called research. They call all of them research. The same thing with performance. If you're a violinist, all you have to do is perform. That is research, and you get your full professorship when you've done enough work. So, and if those are the kind of expectations at the top, they will permeate down, so that a student at the graduate level who is into composition will know that they have to focus on composing. So I think, actually it's just corroborating what Professor Agawu said, that some of the problems are institutional, and that's why we have, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think my takeaway, which I want to, as my job, maybe I'm the chair now, is to summarize the solution here, what looks like a solution. Let's address issue locally according to context. If there's a problem in Nigerian music education, let's sit together. How do we manage it? How do we create solutions? So, and that solution needs to be, people need to take initiative, lead, people will follow. Does that make sense to us? Yeah. So, solution-driven agenda. Maybe perhaps that's where we are right now. Thank you so much. Then we need 2 more, then 1 more from online. So, okay, let's take. Okay, we'll take Dr. Chinedu Osinigwe, Dr. Who is that person? Okay, we'll take 3, 1 online. We have somebody from elsewhere, beyond Nigeria, so they have traveled to this place because of this event. We need to give them that, we need to, compensate their flights, itinerary and everything. Yeah, so we have Mr. Adeyemi, Dr. Chinigwe, Dr. Olujola. Okay. Is that okay with us?
You called me first, so that's how I'm going to say my own first. All right, one thing this symposium has done, it has opened my eyes, and then exposure is great. And then sitting with professors like this that you read, you will be wondering, oh, how is this man? How does it look like? But you're seeing them here talking to you. I want to talk about our research into indigenous music. I want to paint this scenario. We are all seated here. We've evolved from our dress mode. There was a time tie leaves around us, primitive days. Then we came into wearing shirt and trousers, and then we barb our heads, we do all this. We evolved to now we are here. Now, when it comes to scholarship, somebody say, well, let us go back to that pristine time, how it used to be. Like the Christian would say, give me the old religion, our old time religion. I want to ask, can we really go back to that pristine time when music was just, Because if we have evolved as human beings, what are we looking for there? Can't we interrogate what we have there? Can't we, what we've evolved to see, to appreciate? There are some people, because by and large, you will still be using those things. I play piano, I play organ. Maybe I don't know how to play, and then you want me to, how do you begin to make people, you ask yourself, how many people will even appreciate it? So my question is, in this research thing, trying to go back to the music we used to know, is this something we can really achieve, or we're just doing lip service to it? Thank you. I want.
Okay, let's move to the next one. Let's do it together, then profs can address it. Dr. Olujola.
Yeah, my question is this. From what the moderator just said, that what can we do now? Now, I want to ask, is it possible we have a theory of African music that all analysis will be based upon? I doubt it, though. If we cannot do that, can we have people from different regions, like the Yoruba musicology theories, Igbo musicology theories, Ewe musicology theory, so that all these theories, if you want to appreciate the music, you look at the theories that guide that ethnic area alone. So with that one, we'll be able to appreciate the music. Because I still want to ask you, can there be uniformity in terms of theories that guide our own analysis? That's my question.
Thank you. Let's have Mr. Adeyemi.
Thank you for the privilege. Just 3 things. Prof. Agawu, I just wanted to ask first, you said you teach African rhythm. I just want to know, I struggle from a theoretical point of view, to say this is African rhythm. from a theoretical point of view. So if you say you teach African rhythm, what is it and why do you call it African rhythm?
Yeah.
My second...
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, my second question is about complexity. I've always thought complexity has a level of position in it, in the sense that, okay, so here's the material you're looking at. Some people think it's simple. That same material, other people think is complex. And so I've always thought maybe complexity is really about the person looking at it. If you take for those of us who are in practice, for example, I look at a piece and the student is saying, no, this is too difficult. From my point of view, I'm thinking it's simple. And I have been thinking this may be the same with, non-practice concepts that we're talking about, non-practical concepts that we're thinking about. So I just wanted to find out, what do you think? Is there that issue of the person looking at the concept, maybe depending on what kind of awareness or expertise they have in that area? Does it have anything? And then the last part is language. And you might have alluded to this somewhere yesterday. Personally, I feel, to use the term of my beautiful prof here, that for those of us who are in language and music, and especially those of us doing the speech surrogacy thing, there is the overflogging of the importance, maybe I'm wrong, of language at the detriment of sound itself. I feel like we prioritize language and we stop there. Once you're listening to music, whatever is it that is saying to you, especially for choral guys, but we don't necessarily go further to actually engage with the music so that we get the nuances or whatever is it that the sound is saying to us, which may be alluding again to the question of analysis. That, because for me, especially somebody into instrumental music, I feel like sound is really the basis of the music. And for those people that are just talking about surrogacy or just words and trying, I think somebody said it yesterday that if there are no words, then maybe we need to translate the words. And I thought to myself, okay, there is so much you can get from the sound itself that if we are not engaging with the sound, then we are not getting as much. So please.
Yeah. Okay, so I think time is not on our side, so let me just be very brief. The rhythm course that I teach is an introduction to some of the issues I consider to be pertinent to understanding or at least exploring African rhythm. So what I do is I choose those writings, those musics that I think raise these issues, or that have provided models that people can, benefit from, introduce them to the students, and then they all go off and explore a chosen tradition. So it could be a Central African thing, it could be music from Tanzania, it could be music from West Africa, and so on. That's how I do it. I just want to address something you mentioned alongside. Why do I use the term African? Because these musics I'm talking about are African. It's as simple as that. Now, I know that, this is an old issue about, well, is it all of Africa and so on? That question is a distraction. It's a distraction because when somebody says European music, do you think they're thinking about the gypsies? What do you think they're thinking about? And I fear that with Africa, we acknowledge this diversity, and then we suddenly say, okay, so if we're not going to be talking about African, what should we talk about? Return to our individual tribal, ethnic identities? There is, when I say it's a distraction, it's not a particularly helpful thing, because I will teach Arome's theories, I will teach Anku's theories. They deal with different idioms, but they also share certain things, like meter, for example, and rhythm itself, durations, onsets, all of those things. So there are recurring things. And by the way, when I do that, I also bring in one or two theories of Western music, like Ledell and Jackendorf. They have to read that whole book and know about well-formedness and so on. All of this is just to open up avenues for them, you see, so that they can go and explore. I don't know any other way to do it but to equip them. So we don't sit there and worry about, have we covered every inch of African territory? Nobody can do that in any course that I know of. And nobody does that. In fact, I'm even doing better than the ethnomusicologists who teach their research. They are people who've lived among the Ewe, so it's going to be Ewe all through. At least, I do teach Ewe, but I will teach some other things or introduce the things. The main thing, though, is what is the good writing, the good implicative writing that somebody can read and say, oh, okay, this is opening up something for me. And one of the things that comes out of this exercise is sometimes the students will say, this course in African rhythm has helped me to understand Beethoven better. Because dealing with African materials, thank God, without the burden of certain kinds of theories, means that we engage the music freshly. We engage the music in a new way, in a way that if you just come to Beethoven, you have all these theories to deal with. So that's one. The second thing about sound, so I agree with you. I think there's a lot that we can learn about sound. And there is more and more of that happening now, especially because imaging has become so rampant. And my students are constantly putting things in sonic visualizer and God knows what, and telling you about formation of sounds and talking about timbres and so on. There's a lot of that ongoing work. I myself am not an expert on it, but I know that it's being explored. Then theory for all African music. If you can come up with a theory like that, that's fine. I don't have that ambition. And I think when you read someone like Anku, who spent some time working out what he thought was going on in different African idioms, that is helpful. That's just making possible ways of thinking. Then let somebody else take it from there. Or if that opens a door for you, Anku has a set theory, which you may know about, which is showing you that these lead drummers, they're not playing randomly. They're thinking, he thinks anyway, that they're thinking in these sets, that they have subsets and supersets, and that it's more orderly and methodical. Yeah, some people will say, no, that's not correct. But at least he's provided us with a way. And he's done it not by bullshitting, but by actually demonstrating something. So we have a text to work with. We have sound to work with. And then finally, going back, this question of going back. So I think our indigenous music, I didn't quite understand your question, but what I thought, our indigenous music, we should always be dealing with our indigenous music, because I feel that we have not done it justice yet. It's still there, but not exclusively. Okay. And then the other thing is that it is we now who have been exposed to other kinds of music, who are engaging with the indigenous music. So the kinds of insights we are going to have are probably going to be quite different from the insights that somebody 50 years ago or 100 years ago would have had.
Nothing to add.
Okay, the last question online, that's Mr. Gani Kale. Please, let's make it brief so we can close for you there. Thank you so much.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, please.
Great, yeah. Present all the questions that have run through my mind through this whole discussion. It would take too long. And this is not a discussion to miss for any reason whatsoever. That's why I have to make sure that I'm seated all through. Now, well, Professor Omojola and Professor Agawu, I want to thank you very, very much, because I have learned a lot from this discourse. What I take mainly from the discussion is that scholarship must remain accountable to the musical materials rather than merely performing academic conversation. You know, like Schenkerian analysis, the Badiou, or any other theory may be used as an intellectual technology, but we must show what it reveals, what it obscures, and what the music itself modifies, whether it modifies its assumptions or not. So difference and complexity should therefore be demonstrated analytically rather than treated as self-evident qualities of African music. And again, that theory should inform the work, not simply advertise the researcher's theoretical credentials. And that positionality should explain how knowledge was produced without reducing the scholar to a fixed identity or statement. Also, that writing requires reading and criticism and revision and verification and concision. That literature review should establish the intellectual problem to which one is contributing. And then again, that AI may assist, but it cannot replace reading or responsibility for citations. And I think these are absolutely important. I also take the point that that conference presentation should foreground findings and be fully prepared, scripted where necessary, and rehearsed like a musical performance. Like Professor Omojola said, we shouldn't talk over our paper, talk to our paper rather. So rejection also can improve scholarship, but African institutions must also strengthen rigorous journals and supervision and recognition of composition and performance as research. Now, I have so many questions, but let me just narrow it down.
Please just ask one.
Let's say my question, rather than seeking one universal theory of African music or attempting to return to an untouched musical past, should our task be a plural analytical framework that can explain both continuity and transformation in particular African musical practices? Question out of the line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Sorry, I didn't get the question fully, but should our task be to pluralize analytical frameworks? Is that right?
Yeah. Should our task be to develop indigenous, locally grounded, plural analytical frameworks that can explain both continuity and transformation in specific African musical practices?
Yeah. So I think that's a complex question, especially since we are late in the session. So I'll just give you kind of a knee-jerk reaction to that. I actually think that there are levels of convergences that we don't, recognize because we think that something local only happens here. And instead of being open to the possibility that something that is happening here happens elsewhere, and in fact happens in many other places. So I tend to be a little more skeptical about the kind of local, global distinction unless I know the specific phenomenon that we're working with. I'm going back to something Bode was saying. If you are thinking, for example, that a theory such as Ankus, or a theory such as David Locke's, or a theory such as Paul Berliner's, that these theories are kind of local, there may be some local aspects to them because of the materials they're working with, but some of the larger questions they're asking about coherence, about what is the metrical framework in which this piece is unfolding, many of those questions are actually widely shared questions. This is what I have learned from teaching, theories of rhythm and finding that people are asking some of the same questions, except that they're asking them from having worked with slightly different repertoires, So I would prefer not to make some blanket statement about how we should prioritize and simply say, deal with the phenomenon that you're dealing with, pose the questions that you need to ask, and that look over your shoulder and you may find that your neighbor is actually posing some of the same questions. And so there is a meeting of minds there.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Maybe just to add that while we should be guided by the notion of cultural relativism that is motivated to engage with the music we are studying on its own terms, that should not manifest as a difference-oriented paradigm that is bent on painting a binary relationship between pre-colonial and maybe Western music, and that we should be sensitive to conceptual relationships between different kinds of music, even if the materiality of those musics may differ. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to get off my wife. So I want us to give our Prof a round of applause and to appreciate them for this wonderful session. Yeah, it's been an interesting session. Thank you so much, Prof. Agawu. Thank you so much, Professor Omojola. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, take it down. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, I am very sure that many of us, there are some issues that has been resolved today, and I hope they have been resolved. Yeah, so they have been resolved. Yeah. Okay, you said not totally. Then the other ones, we need to go home and settle it. Yeah, institutionally, we go and settle it. And we spread the news across. Yeah.